Mayor, you can proceed. Mayor, you need to unmute yourself.
Unmute myself. Good morning. It's Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. This is the virtual meeting number 1 of the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force. Welcome aboard. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:00 a.m. Let me do something here. I'd like to also welcome all those that are watching and thank those that have registered to speak today. It's a little challenging having to do these meetings virtually, but I think we'll get through it and we'll do a good job altogether. This, of course, is the kickoff meeting for the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Project, step number 1, I call it, which is the concept design. I'd like to share with you some housekeeping notes for at this meeting and go over the objectives of today's meeting. Of course, we got housekeeping to do. I want to introduce all of the project partners, including the task force members and other partners. I'd like to introduce the project. We're going to focus on some big ticket items to set the path forward. We're going to start today with discussion, or not a discussion, but receiving information about traffic study, undergrounding, traffic patterns, low vehicle access zones. We're not quite ready, as you'll learn, to determine amenities. That is at a stage way into the future. We're going to introduce some of these concepts by a presentation by the Rossi group. Be aware that I'm a little anxious about time management. It might be a challenge at this and all future meetings. We've got a limited time frame window to do these things. We could share opinions, but I'm not intending to share opinions at this first meeting, rather to receive information and pose any additional questions so that we can come to meetings number 2 and 3 ready to hit the ground running and discussing and debating the items. After the presentation this morning by Rossi Group, we'll list questions still on our minds and seek answers prior to the next meeting. What I hope to do is promote thinking between meetings of members of the task force, but also members of the public who we encourage to give us input as well. I would encourage the task force and the public to submit their thoughts and feedback via email to committee address on concepts presented today, and then we'll compile that correspondence and make it available to members of the public and members of the task force prior to the next meeting. We'll be prepared at the next meeting to engage in conversations about the concepts again. We are going to devote 3 meetings at least to this today's concepts that are presented so that we have adequate time to discuss them all and formulate committee recommendations. Our anticipated schedule is the next 2 Wednesdays, April 7th and 14th at 9:00 a.m. are on our schedule. And we'll conclude hopefully with the April 7th or 14th meeting with some recommendations to forward to the commissioners. The commissioners will then vote on the recommendations to establish a path forward for the designers in Rossi Group on April 16th. I would like to share with you what the task force is and is not. The most important thing is that this task force is advisory to the Board of Commissioners and the project consultants. We don't have any powers, if you will, other than to make recommendations, which again we forward to the commissioners, and they will make some final decisions based on our recommendations, input, and study and analysis that we provide to them. 16 task force members will collaborate. That's the extent of our task force is 16 folks, which we appreciate everybody applying. The task force membership is primarily comprised of business representatives from various venues in the town and service accommodations, hotels, retail, restaurant, community organizations, and we've got 2 residents also on the task force. Memberships by appointment of the mayor with confirmation by the commissioners. The task force is tentatively can meet weekly, bi-weekly, or as needed. I would really say that it's to be determined. I'm not going to know, we're not going to know how often we need to meet until we get through some of these first meetings. And I would like to remind everybody that our task force meetings are open to the public and comply with the Freedom of Information Act and noticed at least 7 days in advance. And we will have a primer on FOIA as part of our housekeeping in a few minutes. What I'd like to do next, excuse me, is introduce all the partners. And I'd like to do this by first introducing the task force members, and then our ex officio members, project team leaders, design engineering folks, and our DelDOT partners at this first meeting. With that, I would like to indicate that how did we select the task force memberships? We received 24 applications, and they're still welcome to come in. It was an incredible challenge to be able to select the best, if you will, for this task force, because we believed everybody deserved the chance to be on there. The selection team was City Manager Sharon Lynn, Project Public Works Director Kevin Williams, Project Coordinator Evan Miller, and myself, Mayor Stan Mills. And with that, what we ended up doing is merely going in order of application submittal per block, and that's how we came up with the different variety of representatives, if you will. The intention was to get representatives on each block. Excuse me, it's not perfect, but I do expect that members that are selected would reach out to your other neighbors on your block and be able to solicit input from them and offer them input as well, so that we can get everybody's input and feedback. With that, I would like to go to introductions of the task force members. I'm going to read a name. This is your opportunity to say hello. Well, I'd like you to identify yourself in terms of your relationship with Rehoboth Beach. Do you own a business? Which business or businesses? Do you own property? Again, how were you maybe selected for this because of your relationship to the project area? This is your opportunity to have 30 seconds or a minute to advertise your business, essentially. So go for it. With that, I'd like to start with the 13 citizen members of the task force, and we'll start with Joe Baker. Joe Baker, please. Are you there? Is he on? Okay, not seeing Joe Baker. We'll go to the next member, Jenny Burton. I see you're there. Tell us a little about yourself, Jenny.
Good morning.
Unmute yourself. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Jenny Burton, and I am the partner owner of Rehoboth Muse and the Baltimore Commons. My late father developed the property in the 70s. We moved here from Washington, D.C. in 1976, and I'm very grateful that I'm on this task force. I'm anxious to hear everyone's comments, and I'm glad to participate. Downtown every day, most of you, I know a lot of you, so I'm excited to be on this task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. With that, we'll go to, we're going in alphabetical order here, by the way. Frank Cole. Unmute yourself, Frank.
Hi, I'm Frank Cole. I have Atlantic Cycles on Wilmington Avenue and Sea Green Bicycle on Baltimore Avenue. I live on Baltimore Avenue currently. On Monday, I'll be living on Wilmington Avenue again for the summer. So I have a unique perspective on both running a business on both streets and actually living on. rates.
Thank you, Frank. Welcome aboard. With that, Frank Cooper.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Cooper. I'm a resident of Rehoboth Beach since '07. I build houses in town, among other things. I'm very concerned about the aesthetics of Rehoboth Beach. I'm totally committed to that. Helped build several parks in town. I've been self-employed my whole life, including owning a restaurant. So I'm very sympathetic to small businesses, and I understand the challenges. And I have a basic design philosophy that starts with figuring out what the project looks like, what is the vision, and then the small parts fit together with that. And I'm interested in implementing that type of design process here. So I think our task here in designing the vision for this is extremely important. And I'm very anxious to work with all of you in developing that vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Dan Fosnot. And Dan, would you explain the spelling of your name versus the other Fosnot?
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel Fosnok. They have A's where I have O's. There's no relation. We've met in the past. Unfortunately, I have nothing to do with Funland. I run the Oceanus on 2nd Street for the Moore family. We've worked together for 24 years. Looks like I might be the only person representing 2nd Street on the committee. So hopefully, we'll do good things.
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome aboard. Randy Haney.
Good morning. Excuse me. I'm Randy Haney, owner and operator of the Blue Moon on Baltimore Avenue. The Blue Moon has been in existence for, this is our 40th anniversary, started in 1981 by Joyce Felton. We have operated it since 2004 and owned it since 2009. We also own the property that the Blue Moon is located on. So we're very involved with Baltimore Avenue and very interested in this project. We need to develop our downtown business area and for both the residents and the visitors and make it accessible, and whatever we can do to bring people back in town after the last year is very important to all of us, I think. So I'm excited to be involved in this and look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Randy. Welcome aboard. Patty Hoffman.
Hi there. I'm the owner of Stitch Stash. I'm on North First between Baltimore and Maryland. I've been in business about 2.5 years, and I'm brand new to Rehoboth, so I bring a different perspective, which is great. Good. I love to hear people have been here, and I've only lived in this area for about 2.5 years, so 3 years. So it's a needlepoint store, and I'm excited to be on the task force.
Thank you, Patty. Welcome aboard. David Mariner.
Hi, I'm David Mariner. I'm the executive director of Camp Rehoboth on Baltimore Ave. And Camp Rehoboth also owns some of the shops in the courtyard. So that includes Game On, Lori's Cafe, and the Sean Corey Art Gallery. Patty, I'm even newer than you. I've been here for about 16 months, but love it and looking forward to being part of the task force.
Thank you, David. Welcome aboard. Andy Medic.
Hi, I'm Andy Medic. I own Sea Change Vacation Rentals, which is a short-term vacation rental company. We are in the former Epworth Church building on the first block of Baltimore Avenue at 20 Baltimore. I've been a full-time resident of downtown Rehoboth Beach since 2005. And for the past 3 summers, we have moved to a small apartment, a rental apartment above the Diner Lingo grocery store. So I'm very familiar with the traffic flow and the activity on the beach block of Baltimore Avenue. And many of the vacation rental properties, we currently manage 75 properties, and many of those are in downtown Rehoboth Beach. And I can speak to the traffic flow delivery vehicles on our beach block, parking issues from visitors that walk in and comment, And I'm really thrilled to see all of my neighbor and business owners on this call, because we're also busy working. We generally don't see each other. And I'm thrilled, Mayor, to be on this task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Welcome aboard. Howard Menaker.
Good morning, Mayor, and good morning, colleagues. I'm Howard Menaker. I've been a homeowner and resident of Rehoboth Beach for about 26 years now, I guess. Not in the blocks we're examining, but close enough. I own a home in the Pines. I bring a lot of interest, a lot of involvement in Rehoboth Beach, but also hopefully can add in experience of 18 years working for the world's largest construction and engineering company. And while those projects were of a very different scale than this one, the issues, the problems, the challenges are all the same. So I hope that I can be helpful in bringing that perspective as well as the perspective as a resident. So thank you, Mayor, for the appointment, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Howard. Welcome aboard also. Alex Moore.
Hi, good morning. I'm a partner with the Avenue Inn at 33 Wilmington Avenue. My extended family has a total of 12 lots, including the Beach View Hotel on Wilmington. My office was at 44 Wilmington for about 15 years before I moved out to the end of Rehoboth Avenue. So I think I have a unique perspective on what the traffic flow and what's happening on Wilmington. So looking forward to being a part of the task force.
Thank you, Alex. And I'd like to add that the Avenue Inn, of course, went through Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape many years ago, and recently did their own mini streetscape, I call it, on the Wilmington side of the Avenue Inn. So you've got a unique set of experiences to share with us. Thank you. With that, we'll go to Elise. Thank you.
Sidewalk.
Very good. Elise Moore, and if you would explain your non-relationship with Alex Moore, then that would be appreciated.
I wish I had some of those genes, but no, we're not related. But yeah, my husband and I own the Admiral in Baltimore, 2 Baltimore Avenue. We've owned it for 10 plus years, and I'm just so excited to be on the task force. Those of you I don't know, I look forward to meeting you and working with you.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Bob Pomerantz, please. Oh, you're still muted, Bob. Unmute yourself. There you go.
I think I got it. I appreciate being included in this group. I own the Brighton Suites Hotel on Wilmington, and the building where Hunton Lane is now. I reside above Hunton Lane on the 2nd and 3rd floors now, so I live there too. And I'm extremely interested in what's happening with this group.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Welcome aboard. And Joe Baker got on. Go ahead, Joe. We're sharing our relationship to the project area in Rehoboth Beach. I understand you own 2 businesses on Wilmington.
Yeah, I'm Joe Baker. I own Henlopen City Oyster House and the Blue Hen restaurants on Wilmington Avenue. Henlopen City, we've been there for about 11 years this June. We also own the property where Henlopen City is, and been coming here my whole life since I was born, and made it my full-time residence about 20 years ago. So I've worked on Rehoboth Avenue during the Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape as well, and hopefully can have some good input on this. Thanks for including me.
Very good. Thank you, Joe. Welcome aboard. And I'm not going to call on the following, but they can raise their hand and say hello. Commissioner Ed Stronowski is here. He's actually representing Main Street. Rehoboth Beach Main Street asked if he could represent them, and so we agreed. He was appointed to that position. Commissioner Pat Caluzzi. There she is. Welcome aboard. Commissioner Caluzzi chairs the city's Street and Transportation Committee, as well as a parking task force. Not the parking garage task force that in the past, but the parking task force. Welcome aboard, Commissioner Caluzzi. And of course, I'm Mayor Stan Mills. So we have today a full complement of all task force members. We've got a full complement of 16. And again, I welcome everybody on board. I'd like to continue with introductions at this first meeting. Task force ex officio members, members of the city that are also on this committee, is Sharon Lynn, City Manager, Keith Banks, Chief of Police, Kevin Williams, Director of Public Works, Max Hamby, IT Director, Mike Peterman of the Streets Department, he's the Superintendent, Evan Miller, Projects Coordinator, and he's also the Parking Department Representative. Welcome to all the city folks that are here with me today. The project team leaders I just wanted to identify as Sharon Lynn, Kevin Williams, Evan Miller, and Mayor Mills. We're the ones that coordinate with the design committee and the design engineers and DelDOT when we need to. Also like to introduce our project partners. We have the Rossi group, which is the design and engineering group. And I'd like to read you a little bit of information about Rossi Group. Headquarters in Hunt Valley, Maryland, which is north of the Baltimore Beltway. Rossi Group is a woman-owned, disadvantaged business enterprise comprised of highly qualified professionals and industry experts who believe that collaboration builds success. Rossi Group provides transportation planning and engineering, construction management and inspection services, environmental services, water resource engineering, general civil engineering, landscape architecture, and utility design coordination. Some of you might be familiar with their work, although not familiar with them. During the Rehoboth Avenue downtown streetscape enhancement, it was the Rossi Group staff that served as transportation engineer for that streetscape planning and design project along Rehoboth Avenue for the purpose of revitalizing public right-of-way and improving pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular flow and interaction. Staff developed conceptual designs that address the town's desire to increase pedestrian walkability areas, ADA accessibility and aesthetics, and provided surface and parking space comparisons and pedestrian amenities. So hopefully you all will see that they have experience in Rehoboth and will be a great asset to us. Here today with us is Alex Moore and Rita Osiander of Rossi Group. You can get more information by going to www.rossitg.com. Our DelDOT partners, I'm not sure anybody is on the line today, but our DelDOT partners, since we are getting some funding through the Transportation of Alternatives program, the mnemonic for that is TAP. From DelDOT, we have DelDOT partners, Todd Pryor and Michael Hahn. So welcome to them. We are going to look forward to working with you all in the future. With that, we're moving along. I appreciate your patience. I want to share. You'll see we have support documents embedded in the agenda, and these slide presentations are available there. I skipped over 2 slides. You can go to them and see where the membership affiliations are spread out through the project area. What I would like to do next, very briefly, is go over the Freedom of Information Act with you. This is something that's probably 20-some pages in the Delaware Code, and here I am condensing it to what, 6 or 8 bullets. Thank goodness. You know, a lot of us over the years have found out gripes or even compliments about government. With your appointment to this task force, you have now become part of the government. So you may get to experience the joys and of being a government official, if you will. And as a government body, we and this group has to conform with the Freedom of Information Act. Just a very few things. I have to give 7 days notice of any meeting. So you always know at least 7 days ahead of time when we're going to conduct a meeting, and I have to generate an agenda. The agenda is my guide during the meeting of the topics that we are going to talk about. It's also the guide for the public and for the members of the task force on what we are going to talk about. And we can't stray too far from it. So if there's something that you're excited about and want to talk about, we can certainly present it, but I'm likely we'll have to defer it to a future agenda, or it's actually put on the agenda to notice everybody. And I just wanted you to know that. A quorum of members is required for us to formally conduct business and have votes. That would mean for us, our group, 9 members. And also you need to know that a gathering of a quorum or more of task force members, meaning 9 or more members outside of this group, violates FOIA. And subcommittees have similar rules. Now that might seem crazy, but for small groups, especially a task force of say 3 or 4 or 5, it's very easy to accidentally get together in a group outside the task force meeting and conduct business. And again, I'm just referring to freedom of information that indicates that we cannot get together outside of this group in more than a quorum. Very important to note, all written communications relative to task force activities, the project area, things like that, between the members of the task force and other members of the task force or anyone, are public documents and have to be produced upon request. There are a few exceptions, but need to note that when you are typing on your personal email and sending me a note with pros and cons of a particular concept, that becomes a public document that can be shared with the public in the future. So be aware what you say in your written emails, because it could become public. And then we will be taking meeting minutes and approving them at subsequent meetings. Are there any questions yet? Would like to point out that when I'm sharing the screen like that, I can't see everybody. And so you might have to shout out whenever I'm sharing the screen if you have a question. Otherwise, if you aren't familiar with Zoom, if you take your mouse and scroll toward the bottom of the screen, you'll see a header come up or a footer come up that indicates you can mute yourself or unmute yourself. And on the right side, if you hit participants, there'll be a screen that comes up, and at the very bottom of that list of participants, you can raise your hand. You can also lower your hand, and that tells me in sequence who wants to talk or say a comment. Would like to also recognize that we have members of the public that are welcome to come to these meetings or watch the meetings. They're also welcome to talk if they register ahead of time. And registered ahead of time is Rick Perry, Amy Lynn, Dan Slagle, Greer Manival, both of Main Street, Alex Papajohn, and Bob Suppies. So please note that we thank you for registering to speak, and I'll be calling on you at appropriate times as time allows during the meeting. Usually after the task force members have an opportunity to talk, then we go to the public. With that, I think we're ready to acknowledge correspondence. And if you looked in the agenda, there's one bit of correspondence embedded into the agenda. That's from Sarah England at 46 Baltimore Avenue. And it's her idea for directional signs to go outside each alley. And as I mentioned earlier, some of this might be a little premature, but we'll keep this in mind for when we talk about amenities sometime way into the future. With that, Kevin, do you want to introduce Rossi? And again, I think we're time limited today. What I'd like to do is go through all the presentations, suggest that you take notes on each of the topics within the presentation. And then after a presentation, we'll go back to each topic and formulate any additional questions we want to answer and seek answers to and have provided to us before meeting number 2. Kevin, do you want to
Sure, Mayor, thank you. In the interest of time, I'll just introduce Alexis Morris, who is the project manager from Rossi Group, and she'll be presenting kind of their scope and some of the things that they're going to be reaching out to us at a future time to get feedback on as they work through this concept plan.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And again, it's Alexis Morris, not to confuse with Alex Moore on the task force. If you give me one moment, let me make sure that I am presenting correctly. All right. So, again, my name is Alexis Morris. I'm project manager with Rossi Group. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining the Baltimore Wilmington Avenue Streetscape Concept Study. The presentation here will include a little bit of a background and schedule. We'll also go over the existing conditions, proposed schematics, so these are really high-level beginning design, and then next steps. So to begin with our project background and schedule, our mayor went over the project area, addressed that nicely. So we are including Baltimore Avenue, we're including Wilmington Avenue, between 2nd and the boardwalk. We're including elements of 2nd Street as well as elements of 1st Street in this study. We're not including 2nd Street as it intersects with Baltimore Avenue because that's right now under construction. Again, we're not looking at full-scale streetscape design along 1st Avenue or 1st Street and 2nd Street, but kind of as it connects and intersects with Baltimore Wilmington Avenue.
Alexis, can I interject something right there? I just want to make a quick note that the project limits that are shown there are not perfect. There are some property boundaries or project boundaries that are to be determined, such as on North 1st Street. Where does that actually end? Mid-block or go to the full end of the block, or the difference between commercial and residential. So just be aware, if you look at this real closely, that it may not be perfect. Thank you, Alexis.
Absolutely. So this is intended to be an approximate project area. The nice thing about the concept study is because we're not really in detailed design yet, there's space for those project limits to vary. So in the project area, we're looking at Baltimore Avenue and Wilmington Avenue here. They are part of the commercial downtown Rehoboth core, but maybe they've been a little bit neglected in the past, not really being one of those Rehoboth Avenue's prior streetscape study. There's a connectivity issue, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later, but pedestrians perhaps in the project area don't really recognize that connection. So what we're trying to do, what we're focusing on is the aesthetic access and making it part of this central Rehoboth core. Not that it isn't already, but certainly enhancing that. So just some pictures of Rehoboth Avenue, Rehoboth Boardwalk to kind of share with you the direction that we're going in. But understanding also Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue have very different characters and very different features. So objectives for our study. We're looking at the ability to evaluate widening those walkways. We're definitely putting emphasis on ADA accessibility. This study is being funded through the TAC program, which is Transportation Alternatives Program. So it's that ADA, accessibility, pedestrian access, bicycle access that we're emphasizing. We're also going to examine the existing crossroads. We want to make sure that we're increasing safety for bikes and pedestrians, as well as visibility. So enhancing that ability to travel within the area with kind of that emphasis. If while we're doing that, we're able to provide the space for additional outdoor amenities like outdoor dining, that's awesome. But again, we're really trying to emphasize that ADA accessibility and that TED access. So just some features within the Delaware region, and of course right here in front of City Hall. Enhanced TED features, including ramps that increase visibility, whether it's completely striping or some additional enhancements. Make it safer for pets and bikes. And by way of doing that, we're also making it better for vehicles as well. And then evaluating the connectivity to Rehoboth Avenue, making sure that it's recognized when you kind of glance down the alleyway, hey, listen, the commercial core does extend in this direction, let's go. Make it more inviting to get people down those roads and connected to all of the small businesses in the area, as well as the other public amenities. We'll look at lighting, safety, and green infrastructure improvements as well. So we're not really getting into the detail of what lighting fixtures right now we're doing, but we are looking at, okay, well, this is an area where additional lighting would be helpful, increase safety as well as increase aesthetics. And then just some examples of the green infrastructure type design and things like that. So as our schedule, so the schedule that I've highlighted here emphasizes the project schedule, but it also emphasizes when we, the designers, intend to present to the task force. In between those presentation points, it's our assumption the task force is meeting to kind of talk in detail about the decision points that we leave you with. So every time that we present to the task force, we'll leave you with essentially some homework or a to-do list. Decision points where you can talk together, debate, come back with additional requests for information, whatever is needed, to kind of lead us into the next step. So right now we are presenting March 31st. This is really our kickoff meeting. We're going to show our existing conditions. Currently I've got staff out in the field right now, assessing the existing conditions, getting some measurements, identifying where and what parking is out there, what existing pet access looks like, where driveways are, things of that variety. Actually, okay, change of clothes, and I'm going to go join them after this meeting myself. And then based on what our findings are and what your feedback are, feedback is on those high-level schematics, we're going to further refine our schematics and present something end of May to the task force with some pros and cons of what those schematics look like. And at that point, we're going to ask the task force to hopefully decide on a concept design, one single concept design, which could include elements of multiple different schematics and then piece together as a puzzle. So we'll ask for that decision on the concept design. Hopefully we get that decision early June, and then we can carry the draft or that design forward with the draft concept and a cost estimate. So our project team will then go back and kind of refine that with another presentation in September. We're also looking at a public meeting at that time frame. And then we'll summarize our findings in a report and present those to the task force, and hopefully have a report finalized in the project, the concept design wrapped up end of November or mid-November.
Very good. Thank you. Alexis. I just have, as chair, I have two comments to make. One is that this schedule is more for Rossi to let us know certain milestones. If you see the March 31 timeframe is today, and the next big presentation would be May 26th. But also be mindful that we've already scheduled April 7th and April 14th, as Alexis mentioned, time to do additional homework assignments. And so we have extra dates beyond what's shown on this calendar that we need to pay attention to. Also, I think this calendar will help emphasize something I think is very important, and that's the time frame of this project. Within the project area, I had a business email me that they were totally against this project. Didn't want anything to do with it until a later date. But as I read into it, they were concerned that we were going to start jackhammering before summertime. And obviously, we need to make a point that this is a multi-step project, that right now we're looking to complete a task by the end of the year with design concepts. And then after that, there would be refining and engineering and seeking funding. And obviously all those have to occur before we go to bid and start construction. So construction literally could take many years before we get there. So I've got to contact that business and let them know that this is a multi-year function and that the design right now will not impact their business for this summer. Thank you, Alexis.
Mayor, could I interrupt for just a minute? I've heard from several task members on Zoom that we're having difficulty hearing Alexis when she's speaking. Is there any way to move the mic closer?
Yeah.
That's a little bit better.
We've moved the microphone around, so let's try that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Is that a little bit better? Can I get a
Yeah.
thumbs up perhaps?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, fantastic. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's the challenge sometimes in different conference room spaces, and then the masks certainly don't help, but I'll try and be clearer. So our next step, like I said, we've got staff members out in the field right now looking at existing conditions. They're taking measurements, they're identifying where driveways are, parking meter kiosks, things of that variety. Also just some high-level GIS data that we were able to download. Clearly you can see zoning, we're in the commercial core, and that's kind of our emphasis, but as the mayor mentioned, with the project limits, so there's kind of that differentiation between the commercial core and the residential areas that are on Maryland Avenue and Delaware Avenue. Another thing to note that might come up and play into some of our design considerations is the flood zone. FEMA flood zone extends up Wilmington Avenue quite a bit. So we might find that there are some issues there, some challenges there, some additional stormwater areas that we need to flag for additional consideration as our project moves forward. I did a quick scan of the area. We're not in a historic district, some of kind of those other high-level planning things that need to be considered because as projects move forward, it comes up, it's a question. So kind of just those environmental scan things. But if there's anything within our project area that you know, hey, listen, there's a lot of flooding here, or this particular intersection, this is a problem, feel free to flag and let us know because that's what we need to be looking at. Also, you know, part of the reason that we have the police chief here joining us and on this task force is we don't want to do things from a design perspective that maybe make parking enforcement more difficult and make it more difficult for them to do their job.
Thank you, Alexis. Go back to that real quick. I'd like to work with you on maybe expanding this map a little bit. It might be easier to have multiple maps, one for just the flooding zone and et cetera. But also I'd like to make sure that the nomenclature matches our existing zoning map. I think there's one or two things here that we can do a little better, as well as to colorize to match the current zoning map. So we'll be in touch on that, but
sounds great.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, the consideration of utility undergrounding, as you can see, there's a lot of aerial utilities within the project, electrical, Comcast, obviously, or cable, and other elements. So Kevin was kind enough, he got in touch with Delmarva and kind of started some of those initial conversations. So it's important to note when we consider utility undergrounding, so pole-mounted transformers that are out there today, they have to stay out there. They would then be pad-mounted and they would be on the sidewalk, potentially presenting additional access concerns or impacting the sidewalk areas. Additionally, wireless cell facilities are still required in public spaces, so they have to be mounted on poles or buildings. The complete elimination of poles isn't feasible. And based on those initial conversations with Delmarva, a reasonable estimate to bury utilities in a typical block is about $750,000. And that's just one block. Also, you know, Rossi, as a consultant to DelDOT, it's important to disclose DelDOT's not at in a position to pay for utility undergrounding. So our recommendation at this point is that utility undergrounding is not part of this study. It doesn't mean that it can't be considered later, but not part of our initial concept design study.
Thank you, Alexis. And just to remind the public and the members that this is, we're receiving information now, and afterwards we'll do a little discussion group.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
So another conversation that came up was the consideration of a traffic study and whether or not it's required that we do a traffic study at this point. The short answer to that question is the appropriate time to complete your traffic study really depends on the project. If your intent is to go out there and improve vehicular flow, increase capacity, reduce travel times, then obviously you have to start with a traffic study. You need to know what's going on out there today. But the objectives here is really we're a streetscape, okay? We're emphasizing enhanced bike and ped accessibility and livability within the project area. Some of the streetscape elements are going to prioritize those ped and bike enhancements over vehicular traffic flow. I think that's important to know. Then also we have some other things going on. Obviously, you know, this past year, traffic data that's collected this spring and summer may not necessarily be representative of your typical conditions. Certainly, I hope that it's closer to normal for Rehoboth and for all of our states this year, but it may not be necessarily representative. Also, any traffic study that's completed now is probably going to show that your peak period in the peak season is unacceptable. Traffic is high and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. Related to that, any of the schematics that we come up with aren't necessarily going to improve traffic, and you may even find that they decrease traffic or worsen traffic conditions. So it's just something else to consider. Traffic study would also delay the concept study. Based on all of this information, it's our recommendation that a traffic study is not part of your streetscape concept development. Doesn't mean that it doesn't come later. Certainly it does, especially if you start looking at things like one-way or, you know, things that impact your traffic. But then that's even going to expand your traffic network that you would be studying. So proposed schematics, and this is kind of what we're laying out cookies or morsels for thought to the task force. One-way traffic. So here I've highlighted kind of the area that we would be considering one-way traffic, potentially. So what you could look at is one-way traffic on Baltimore and Wilmington avenues. But you could also look at a full loop providing one-way traffic on Baltimore and Wilmington avenues and 1st and 2nd Street. The nice thing about one-way traffic is we could also consider reducing through lanes to 1 lane, or maintain it at 2 lanes, but in either case, it allows us to tighten up the vehicle footprint, which gives us a little more space, more opportunity to expand bike and ped areas, parking, and delivery zones. It's also, there's an enhancement to bike and ped safety potentially, because obviously they don't have to worry about looking both ways before crossing the streets. It's really only one way. But this concept, this schematic would have greater impact on vehicle capacity. And certainly I mentioned before, that impact is going to extend to the larger roadway network. So there's pluses and minuses to looking at something like this. Again, we're just kind of laying out these cookies for the task force to chew on, and then you can let us know if you want us to consider something like this moving forward. So a limited vehicle access zone. And this is kind of something that we were considering to enhance ped access, kind of make it a little bit more of a plaza setting, but we also recognize that we're in a commercial core. Deliveries are going to be required. They will always be required. You cannot eliminate vehicular access. So something to consider, it could be the entire block between 1st Street and the boardwalk, or it could only be a portion of it. It could be combined with the one-way traffic schematic or without, and it definitely expands options for pedestrian amenities, but we would always allow for deliveries, EMS access, and potentially even drop-off, but no parking permitted. So again, one of those things, there's pluses and minuses to this idea, but it's something to consider moving forward. And then our other schematic that we would consider is enhancing our current layout. And that's not unlike what's happened here with Rehoboth Avenue and the streetscape there. I've got some pictures here of other DelDOT TAP projects before and after. So as you can see, we're not really changing the footprint. We're not really changing a lot of the parking and things like that, but certainly there's space for increased and enhanced ped access, bike access, visibility, things of that variety. So again, you still have those opportunities for the ped and bike improvements, but it's going to be least impactful on your vehicular routes and least impactful on parking. Of course, we're also providing opportunities for deliveries, EMS access, and drop-off. And then other schematics. So, you know, you guys live in the area, you work in the area, you've been here, in many cases for a very long time. Are there other ideas that you've seen elsewhere or that you think might work better here? Again, we're at schematic design. We aren't getting down to specific dimensions at this point in time. It's really just trying to figure out what direction we're going in. That's the idea behind the concept study. So next step. Decision points and dates. April 14th is kind of our target date, and we're throwing it out there. Clearly, it isn't steadfast, but our anticipation is the task force is going to have meetings that follow this one. Any additional existing conditions that you have that you want to feed back to us, please feel free to do so. The more information we have, the easier our lives become, and the better the data that we feed to you is. Also, additional requests from us. If there's something that isn't clear in our presentation here, you'd like some additional information, we will do our best to get back to you. Feed that through the task force, and we are here to serve. So if we can get agreement on the schedule as well, I think that that's important. So, and it's not really so much agreement on the schedule, but just that understanding, hey, this is our schedule. These are the decision points that we're asking for. Certainly the feedback to our team helps to drive our schedule forward. So kind of where we're at with that. And then the schematics to carry forward. So kind of those slides, are there additional schematics you want to see? Is there a specific combination? Are there things that you're just simply no-go? This is a terrible idea. This will not work in our community. That's the type of feedback we're looking for. So our next task force presentation is May 26th. At that point, we're going to focus on presenting enhanced schematics, and we'll certainly structure that meeting based on the feedback that we've received here today. And I guess, are there any other questions or comments for us?
Not right now. We'll carry that over and continue with some project team slides. As far as this, before we take this down, the April 14th day, remember, our second task force meeting will be on the 7th. Our third task force meeting will be on the 14th. Hopefully we come to conclusions on all these design concepts that are in front of us by the end of the 14th. We will keep the commissioners fully informed of what's going on. Of course, we have 3 commissioners on the task force, Commissioner Clusie, Edward Shanowski, and myself. There is a report at the commissioners workshop meeting of the 5th, so they'll be updated on what's going on if they're not watching today. And then on the 16th, I've announced already that on the regular agenda of the commissioners, we would conduct a vote on the recommendation so that we have some finality in the direction that we're going to give Rossi Group. Do you have anything you want to add, Kevin, or we'll go to, so unshare your screen there, Alexis. Very good. Let me. So what we'd like to do is the project team would like to take you through some of the slides that we created to help clarify what Rossi Group just explained to us. And we'd like to entertain any additional questions you might have. Again, rather than seeking opinion on all the concepts today, I really wanted to introduce these to the public and the members. Allow time, a week's time to absorb it, reflect on it, and come up with some of your own thoughts based on your own perspectives of what works and what doesn't, so that we can hit the ground running with a conversation on these same topics on April 7th. So the first thing that we were talking about was the traffic study. Kevin, you can, and Evan, you can fill in if you want. I think the important thing here for us for the traffic study was the timing of it. And the main thing is that it would likely delay this project, in which case we would lose out on the funding. You know, I'm always mindful that the reason we got funding for the Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape was because the money was offered to another municipality first, and they balked, and DelDOT said, okay, well then we're giving it to the Rehoboth Beach. So I don't want to pause on this. Here I am giving an opinion. I shouldn't be doing that. For the traffic study, just be mindful of the project area and the surrounding area, whether the traffic study would be just for the project area or the entirety of the city or a greater area. You have anything you want to add, Evan or Kevin? No? Underground utilities and existing conditions. Just want to be mindful that all those transformers you see up in the air have to go somewhere if you're removing those poles. All the light poles and yard arms that are up there have to come down to the ground level somehow. So you need to replace them with freestanding light fixtures. You need to have, as is shown here, the transformers ground mounted. And that in itself could be problematic. I know that Commissioner Gossett, if he were here, maybe he can comment next time, that on the design of Lake Avenue Phase 1, we considered undergrounding, and there was a lot of challenges there. So we'll share those with you in the future. I just lost half my team here. Anything you want to add?
No, I think you covered it all, Mayor.
All righty. As far as one-way streets, here's kind of a summary of some options. There's certainly a lot more options. But we created several options for you to try to use to make it easier for the members of the task force and the public to be able to review these slides and formulate your own ideas and reference. I like option A but not B, or I like C1 but not D1. So this is a clockwise one-way pattern that utilizes First Street and Second Streets. This is option B, which is merely going counterclockwise, the same thing, utilizing First and Second Streets. And one-way streets, option C1 is Baltimore Avenue going toward the ocean and Wilmington going away, and C2 is just the opposite, Baltimore going away from the ocean and Wilmington going with two-way traffic on First and Second Streets. Option D1 is both streets, Wilmington and Baltimore, go the same direction, this time toward the ocean, and D2 would be both going the same direction away from the ocean. Sharon, do you recall, help our memory, when you were new on board here as city manager, I believe you brought the concept of one-way streets out in the open. And do you recall what the time frame was of that, who participated, and what the outcomes were?
Yes, Mayor. That time frame was actually in the summer and fall months of 2014, extended a little into the beginning of 2015. It was a group effort of some business owners, those that were interested at the time. I remember Mr. Cole being on the team. Nicole's Pizza was represented. Summer House was represented. A few other businesses. It was just a conceptual idea of what we could bring to the table based on what I heard. My first comments, if you will, as a new city manager here, mainly from the police chief regarding summer traffic, what I observed myself, experience I've had in other municipalities dealing with traffic and deliveries and the like. So it was about a 9-month to maybe a 12-month effort that really didn't get off the ground, but in discussion, we did talk about one-way streets. Delivery folks were involved, those from Cisco and I think Pepsi or Coca-Cola. And really it didn't get off the ground. But again, it was a concept to pretty much discuss if and how we could even accomplish that.
So this is something that we would invite the city to give an opinion on. So the city manager and the chief of police could report back to us if they have any preferences or recommendations.
Well, I think as we get further into the program, Mayor, I know that, depending on what the task force decides and the Rossi group comes up with, as far as widening the streets and making pedestrian areas and bike lanes, that will pretty much, I think, determine whether or not there's space available to keep it two-way traffic or one-way.
Well, I put a lot of value in the businesses and that are in the project area to be able to help share their perspective and share their opinions on this. Because they're the ones that live it, look at it, walk it, and receive deliveries and shipments every day. So I'm anxious to hear what they have to say. Are there any? Before we go on to the next one, let's just entertain any extra questions. Rossi has actually left the room. And so what we'll do is entertain questions that we want to ask them so that we can seek answers and have them provided back to this task force and the public prior to the next meeting. Are there any questions specific to one-way streets that we want to ask Rossi? And I have to turn off, stop sharing to be able to see you all again. There we go. Commissioner Srnowski, you've got your hand up. Yes, sir.
No, Mayor, that was
questions, not opinions.
Yeah, that was a holdover from when we could not hear Alexis.
Howard Menaker, questions that we should be posing to Rossi?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I know that with these projects and any one of these schematics, there's the basic concept of what they're proposing, that there are always ramifications and there are always consequences, both anticipated and unanticipated. So I would just ask them the next time we discuss this, if they could just list those, not what they're going to be, but what other things, for instance, if you do A, then you will necessarily have to do B. And we are not talking about any of the B's yet, but we know that will happen, sidewalk width, all those sorts of things. So I would just ask them to explore a little bit further with these three options, the limited vehicle access, the one-way streets, the current layout, and I guess also the undergrounding of utilities. What are the consequences we need to consider before we make the decisions?
Very good. Thank you, Howard. Anybody else? That was a broad comment applicable to everything, but we're also focusing on one-way streets. If there's no further comments here, we'll get to the public as we go along. Andy Medic?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My observation that the four-way intersections currently on the first block, Wilmington and Baltimore, they're so crazy in the summer. If you're in a car or any kind of vehicle, you have to look four ways several times, back and forth. And I'd be interested to hear some feedback from the traffic experts on the ramifications of making those circular one-way or bidirectional. The different options of the one-way system particularly appeal to me.
Okay, so that's another set of questions we can pose to them. Again, we're focusing on questions to help us do our homework. Frank Cooper? Frank, and we're focusing on one-way street.
I would like them to give us more information about undergrounding utilities as far as experience they may have had with other cities as far as cost and the ramifications of the transformers and whatnot. I'd like more information about that before we dismiss that as not being an option. That's all.
All righty. Again, we're trying to focus on one-way streets right now, one topic at a time. This makes it a little easier to compile our questions. Thank you, Frank. Commissioner Stranowski?
Mayor, I think I guess the question I have is I'm wondering if, in addition to implementing one-way streets and changing traffic patterns in other municipalities where they've done streetscape, if they've suggested other things like restricting time of deliveries and other things that may work in conjunction with changing traffic patterns. So that's a question.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much. Patty Hoffman, any comments or questions on one-way streets that we should ask Rossi?
Well, and I'm just curious, are we talking one-way streets during summer time or all year?
I think we're not answering that today, but that's a question that we'll pose.
Okay.
And it may be posed to us. Thank you, Patty. Anybody else? Again, we'll get to the public.
I have a question.
Randy, yes, sir.
It's Joe Baker. I would just ask.
Joe, go ahead, Joe.
I would ask how many parking spaces they feel we could gain by going to one-way streets.
Okay, that's very important. Very good. Thank you. Randy?
My only comment or question would be, and I think we've seen a little bit of it with what has been done in the area on Lake Avenue that just completed. The one way going towards the ocean, or I guess it's east, that is now one lane through there. And we're not even in the summer, and I'm seeing some problems with people trying to parallel park both sides and traffic coming to a complete stop because you've only got one through lane. So that could be a consideration if with a one-way pattern. Also, if we narrow the through lanes, if we're going to have more congestion because people are having traffic backing up while people are trying to parallel park, especially when they're trying to parallel park on the side that they're usually not on their left side, which they're usually not used to parallel parking on.
Thank you, Randy. Good question. Elise Moore?
Hi, I'm just a little confused about how we could make a decision like this without a traffic study. You know, I don't understand how we as a committee can make a decision about one way and parking without a full traffic study of the city, because we all know, you know, in July, what could happen. And is this schematic I don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Should the traffic study come first or the schematic design come first?
And we're not going to be able to answer that today, but we'll make a note of that. I think that's a very important question for us to answer. And again, if you go back and look at the slides, you know, they have hit the tip of the iceberg, perhaps, with some of the questions, but maybe there's some additional questions that we need to answer. Thank you, Elise. Commissioner Shanowski?
I was just going to take Elise's comment and turn it into a question to the consultants on how many municipalities have they worked with where they did not have a traffic study but changed the traffic patterns.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. With that, I see no more questions. We'll go to, I'm going to share the screen again. We're going to go to, see, we'll go to the next. The next topic was limited access zones. I didn't put any wording in, we didn't put any wording on this, but if you look at the picture, what are some things that we can identify in here for a limited vehicle access zone? I originally used the term pedestrian plazas, but pedestrian plazas is, I was told, somewhat denotes no traffic whatsoever, zero vehicular use. And obviously, limited vehicle access is required on this. So what do people see in here? Again, I can't, unfortunately, when I share the screen, I can't see hands, so I'm going to do the talking, darn it. Well, I see two-way traffic. It's really not proper to call it traffic. There's opportunities for vehicles to come and go in a limited vehicle zone. It's not full traffic. There's delivery vehicles. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah. Yes.
There's delivery vehicles happen to be parked somewhat across the sidewalks, but of course you can go down the pedestrian way. There are lights, so there's lighting element. There's seating element, trash can element. There is a pavered walkway that's different from what would be the surfacing for a typical traffic lane like macadam or something. And I don't know if anybody sees anything else that's inviting about this. Did I mention outdoor dining? So again, I have to go off of this to be able to ask questions. Two options here. Option A says the entirety of the first block could be a limited access zone. Option B would be some portion, not the entirety, but some portion of the first blocks could be limited vehicle access zone. It could also be that you choose to do something here but not here, or vice versa. And the transition line would need to be identified, whether it's up here or maybe it's only the end of the street, et cetera. So again, I need to go out of this to be able to see who might be asking questions. So again, what we're looking for are what are some additional questions that arise by looking at these slides that we want to ask Rossi. Frank Cooper? There, Frank?
Has there ever been a traffic study done in Rehoboth at any time? Your knowledge?
I don't.
At various different parts of the city, nothing specific that I know of on Baltimore or Wilmington Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Commissioner Sernowski, anything specific to limited vehicle access zones?
Yes, I think a question, I think that would be helpful. One, I think some pros and cons related to each of these, as mentioned before, I think would be very helpful. But specifically, maybe unlike some of the other projects where they've implemented limited traffic zones, we have many condos and hotels with parking lots in those areas. And how has the Rossi Group dealt with those in past projects that they've had? What feedback would they give where there's situations like that?
Thank you, Ed. Alex Moore?
I'd say same thing Ed just said. What are the pros and cons? I'm struggling with the idea of how they're beneficial. These zones would be beneficial, especially when I wouldn't consider either of those streets highly not retail oriented. I would think that type of zone would be more retail focused. So same to Ed. What's the idea behind it? What's the benefit to it?
Thank you. And don't forget, of course, that one of the options is in terms of the limited vehicle access zone is to do nothing. So that's one of the options. Alicia, you took yourself off. Do you want to say anything?
No, I was going to say pretty much what Edward and Alex just said. I was
All
curious.
right.
Yeah, you know, that's all.
Thank you very much. Alex, your hand up again, or? Nope. Nope. Okay, you're taken care of. Thank you very much. Again, we'll get to the public after we go through these with the member input. Let me share the screen again. One of the options is that we were presented by Rossi is to just work with the current layout we have, which means the two-way traffic on 1st Street, 2nd Street, two-way traffic on Baltimore and Wilmington in entirety, and just enhance what we have. Well, that means, of course, abandoning any thoughts of limited vehicle access zones and one-way streets. So that is certainly another option in front of us. This slide is merely just to remind everybody the nomenclature, that if you're talking about something that we want to reference, 1st block of Baltimore, 2nd block of Baltimore, North 1st Street, South 1st Street, etc. That's all that is. It's also a reminder that as you look at any of these concepts, limited vehicle access zone, one-way street, you need to look outside the project area zone to see how traffic is directed. In other words, if this is one way here on North 2nd Street, it becomes two-way traffic here. And then up here, there's a left turn and a right turn, but there's no turn here because that's one way. You just need to look at that. And you might need to look beyond the project zone even farther to see what the traffic patterns might be with that. With that, I'm going to go see if anybody has questions we should pose Rossi on the enhanced layout or any of those topics. I have one question that I would like, and that is that we were given an estimate for undergrounding $750,000 per block. I'd really like to know what the estimate is for the entirety of the project area, because the one block of 1st block of Baltimore is certainly different than the one block of North 1st Street. So total undergrounding costs. Does anybody else on the task force team? Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, along with your question about the cost, one of the things that you see on Rehoboth Avenue, of course, are the very big transformers that are in the ground. But I think perhaps those transformers are much larger because of the need of electricity for those large poles. So I would like to know, as far as transformers on the ground, are we looking at a similar situation with very large transformers? Or perhaps we're looking at smaller ones that we might, it might be okay for that area. So I certainly would like to know the answer to that question.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other members? Commissioner Sharnowski? You're muted, Ed.
Sorry about that. On the same line as that question from Commissioner Clusie is how many of them are on each street? You say transformers, and I look down the street. It seems like almost every pole has a transformer on it, but I probably don't know exactly what I'm looking at when we say transformer. So I think knowing how many per block that we're talking about would be helpful.
Well, we can certainly do that. I think it would be most beneficial to everybody to walk the project zone and start looking up and consider that if you're going to go underground, then that means the removal of all the telephone poles, most likely. And so that means that everything mounted to a telephone pole has to come to the ground level. That includes those yard arms the lights are on. It includes the cans that are up there, transformers. And the thing with those transformers, my understanding is from working on Lake Avenue Phase 1, is the transformers have to go reasonably close to the location they're at now because of the size of the electric wiring. They can't all be moved, for instance, to mid-block so that they're all clustered. They've got to be spread out. Kevin, do you have any further knowledge or?
No, that's about right, Mary. You know, it wouldn't necessarily be a 1-for-1 for every pole-mounted transformer. You'd need a pad-mounted transformer, but you'd certainly maybe half as many, but you'd still have to find those pad-mounted locations, and the pad and the transformer itself would be about the size of the can that's hanging on the pole. So if you combine 2 into 1, the transformer is about the size of 2 cans. You'd have to find a spot for that.
Thank you. So we can certainly add that, but again, I think it would behoove all of us to walk the project area and just start observing everything. Ed, your hand still up?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, you're down. Howard Menaker, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Along with these questions that we're asking about the utility relocation, I'd like to ask Rossi if this is an all or nothing proposition. Is there a midpoint where we say underground in one block but not another, or does that not make any sense at all? So I would like to hear they sort of forecast overall and said, you know, there's no way we can eliminate all the poles. While that may be true, I wondered if there is some sort of middle ground that they would propose or at least offer as an opportunity.
Let me bring up a slide there. I think you make a good point. Okay, so use this illustration. Here's a box here. I think that might be traffic controlled, but here's everything green is Delmarva Power. But of course, we need to be mindful that you're also talking about undergrounding cable TV, Verizon telephone wires. What else? If you had gas line, we don't have gas lines, I guess. So that also has to be taken care of. All our own electrics for freestanding lights that would have to be added need to be undergrounded also. All those need to have their own conduits and different trenches. So it's a very complicated process. But what I wanted to do is come to this and address your one comment. Is there a medium ground? Of course, we're talking about undergrounding all this mess, which is primarily on one side of the street. However, you have all these wires that go from one side to the other. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on mid-range option for undergrounding?
So Delmarva, yes, Mayor. Delmarva had made another suggestion or possibility is if you just wanted to get, you know, the wires from crossing the street. So if you still leave poles on one side and transformers mounted, you could underground the wires that run over to the individual homes and mold them underneath the road surface. So that, you know, would have a cost associated with that as well. It would also involve, you know, individual residences or buildings would have to, you know, have an electrician make that connection because Delmarva wouldn't do the physical connection to the house. So, but there are some options available to us if we just wanted to clear that, that particular, you know, the wires from going across the street. The other thing is, you know, if we have lights on both sides, you're going to need a pole, you know, to put a light up on that side. And then they mentioned, you know, the whole cell, you know, the whole 5G world that we're rapidly becoming entrenched in, that it's, you know, basically a pole and an antenna on every block per carrier. So, you know, you're also going to get some of those added into the sight line as well that aren't necessarily there now, but would have to go. And I always quoted a famous Del.Dot guy, or infamous Del.Dot guy, who quotes, "Yeah, we're going to bury wires to grow 5G antennas," as a way of thinking of it.
Thank you. Howard Menaker, your hand's still up? Okay, you're fine. Patty Hoffman, any more questions that we can be posing to Rossi to prepare for next week's meeting?
Yeah, just a quick question. How long like if we decided to do all this underground stuff, or what kind of time frame, how does it work on, how long does it take to do the project? Like, because it's going to affect businesses, closed streets, I would assume, and things like that. How does that affect us, or how long does it take to do underground?
Well, those that have been through, there's no good answer to that. It's going to take a long time, but based on my observation of the Rehoboth Avenue streetscape, pretty much all the businesses would be open, 99% of the time. And access to the store would be provided 99% of the time. But again, there's no pat answer on that. I don't even know that we can be asking that question at this stage. It's something to keep in mind, though. Thank you, Patty. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, thank you. The idea of undergrounding the power lines and to get rid of all of those, at least those posts, what we're looking at on Baltimore and Wilmington, I think, is quite old technology. And even on Rehoboth Avenue, when we've had this, the streetscape's been quite a while ago. I'm wondering if the technology is such that we're not looking at massive above ground types of, for lack of a better term, the housing for the utilities. So I'd certainly like to know the answer to that question. It's related, I guess, to the question I had earlier. Could these be smaller? And also the other question would be, if we did undergrounding, could we have Delmarva Power, which has, I believe, funded a lot of our lighting? Would they be open to doing something like that? And again, we have been looking at dark skies. It gives us that opportunity to perhaps incorporate something like that. Thank you.
Well, Commissioner, we can certainly ask Delmarva. My experience in the past is the answer was an emphatic no. That they're not interested in funding anything. Kevin, do you have?
Yes, Mayor. We did have that conversation with Delmarva early on to see what they would be willing to do, if anything, for us. And their comment was, they'd be willing to do whatever we ask them to do, but it's not going to be free. So they are going to charge us what their normal rates would be. And they worked. They're the ones that really put most of the effort into that cost estimate per block at $750,000. So. Yeah, they weren't willing to throw any of that in for free.
Well, I'm throwing in there a generic question on see if we can seek more logistics for undergrounding, because we've articulated several points here after the Rossi presentation, and we've come up with them on our own. Pat, I think you proposed some good questions also. The cost figure would be interesting to me, because I would bet the total undergrounding of the entire project area would exceed $6 million. That could be a game changer and crush the project. So that certainly could be a consideration. Also, what could be a consideration in logistics, as Kevin mentioned, is the hookups to the individual businesses. That there's a cost there to the individual businesses, perhaps, if we go that route. Also, I'll share with you on Lake Avenue, when we tried to design the phase one Lake Avenue is the area between Cultured Pearl or Starbucks and Bad Hair Day. We were looking at undergrounding there, and the cost at that time was prohibitive for just that one block area. But what we found is, again, we had to bring all the elements that were up in the air down to the ground level. And that either meant consuming parking spaces, which is a premium in that area, or it meant seeking permission from landowners to have easements and put them on their property. And you can probably guess how many property owners were amenable to that. 0. So those are all some logistics things that we can see if we can further get details on. Commissioner Stronowski?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. On the same line, I think any environmental concerns or considerations and weather concerns or considerations and any data related to it would be helpful to know. In addition, there's, I would ask, the question to the consultants or Kevin or Delmarva, there would certainly be some cost savings to Delmarva if we undertook something like this. You pruning of the trees around the power lines, down power lines because of wind. There's going to be considerations that I think it's good that we should outline those and know what those are.
Well, my experience is
or negative.
Thank you, Commissioner. My experience is actually the opposite with Delmarva and undergrounding. We can certainly ask. The reason it's different is because if there's any outages, it's very easy to drive down the road with the flashlights up in the air and find out where there's a break or there's a limb causing problem. When the problem is underground, they have to excavate. So it is very, very costly difference in aerial maintenance and underground maintenance. Frank Cooper?
Yes, somebody had mentioned the fact that we have impending 5G equipment going in. And I was wondering if the consultants could add that to the existing photographs to see what we're talking about in the immediate future. In other words, we're looking at these poles with the transformers and stuff, and they're not very attractive now. It's going to get worse. So the problem that we face in the future might be, my God, what is this mess? And it might, in the near future, seem more important than it does now. So.
Thank you, Frank. Randy?
Yes, this is personal experience. I think it was about 5 years ago. We upgraded both of our electrical services for both of our buildings, and they did set a pad transformer across the street. We had to pay for the undergrounding from under Baltimore Avenue. They had to set a junction, another pad, which is just a smaller box on right outside of our property to tie everything in. And I think that cost us about $4,000 just for the undergrounding on that. And also, if you look at Camp Rehoboth, when they did their renovations, they also have a transformer mounted kind of against their building too. So that'll give you some idea of what they look like. And all they do at that point is just go back up the pole, the closest pole, and tie it back in to the overhead services. But anytime you do a service upgrade, I think they're requiring you to go underground, or at least that's what they did with us.
Thank you, Randy. We've got a few more members that want to ask questions, and we've got time for those. Again, we're seeking questions we seek answers to, and let's exhaust the task force questions before we go to the members of the public. Jenny Burton?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to comment after listening to, is there a way that we can get a comparison between bearing versus not bearing concrete figures, so the task force can really make a educated decision as to what to do, as well as possibly getting a comparison on timing, which prompted my comment when Patty made a comment. And I remember clearly the 3 phases of the streetscape on Rehoboth Avenue, and the businesses on Rehoboth Avenue very frustrated that 9-foot fences were in front of their businesses for a lot longer than was projected due to problems with undergrounding and so forth. And my concern is my 12 tenants in a couple years when this happens can't afford to have loss of business. So, I'd love to see a comparison of timing, whether, how long it would take to underground them versus not, and keeping it on top and having it attractive looking or more attractive looking than it is now. and also the cost of undergrounding versus not, and and then the timing phase, where if it would be a year or a half a year to not, and then maybe 2 years to do all of the streetscapes on Wilmington and Baltimore.
Yeah, that's a good point. This could certainly be a multi-year project and done in phases. You're right, Rehoboth's streetscape was done, I think, the first 2 blocks, and then the next 2 or 3 blocks, and then the balance. So that might have to occur here. I'm adding to my questions on the logistics of undergrounding. You reminded me that Rehoboth Avenue undergrounding also involved, of course, tearing up all the sidewalks, which would be done in this type project. But it also involved the reconnections of all the sewer lines and water lines. So how involved would this be if we go with undergrounding is one of my additional questions. Thank you, Jenny. Howard Menaker.
Thank you, Mayor. This is probably a question for a later phase, but since we've begun down that road, could you just share with us at the next meeting whether the city staff or the mayor and commissioners have set in their own minds a concept of the length and the budget for this project? Because there's no sense in our coming up with something that's completely prohibitive in terms of cost to the city, or would take too many years or whatever. So again, I'm sure we can't answer that quite yet, but if you have parameters for us to consider, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Howard. David Mariner.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about the power lines as they exist now. Pat mentioned that they were old and newer versions may be smaller or more condensed if we had them on the ground. I'm wondering if there's more attractive ways to, if we kept them in as poles, to make them more condensed or more attractive as well. If there's other options, if Delmarva got different equipment on this street, what that might look like and how it might change the way that it looks visually. And just to go back, I'm also kind of curious. I know, people said, we don't really have time for a traffic study, or we might not have time to be able to do that. For the one-way streets, for some of these other things, I'm just really curious about what information they can bring us about other jurisdictions that have gone from two-way to one-way streets, either in their experience or general studies on those topics that we could look at. I just did a quick Google search, but I'm sure that they know much, much more than I do about that.
Thank you. Thank you, David. With that, I don't see any more task force questions. If there are no more, then I'd like to go to the members of the public and remind them that I'd like to entertain the same exercise. What kind of questions do you have that you would like for us to seek answers for, to share with the members of the task force and the members of the public? Rick Perry, are you on board?
Yes, I am, Mayor. Thank you.
Yes.
2 questions come to mind. One is, what is Rossi's experience in identifying grants that might be helpful in offsetting the cost of some of these things, particularly undergrounding, and what have other communities done in that regard? And my second point is, does the Rossi project scope include assessment of the impact of one-way streets on the surrounding residential streets and what might happen with traffic flow?
All right, thank you very much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thinking in particular of First Street, that's the major access from North Rehoboth. There's only one way into town from North Rehoboth, as opposed to access from the south. And so those considerations are important in my view.
Very good. Thank you, Rick. Amy Lynn, are you there? Amy Lynn looks like she may have dropped off. She's with Sarah England, I believe, with that directional signage. So we'll make note of that for future. Next member of the public, we got Dan Slagle and Greer Manival, Main Street. You have anything additional to say that Ed hadn't shared?
Good morning, Mayor. No comments at this time or questions.
Thank you. Alex Papajohn.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Alex, identify yourself if you would, please, so that everybody knows who we're listening to.
Sure, yeah, Alex Papajohn, our family has owned property on Rehoboth Avenue since the 1930s. We have owned property on Wilmington Avenue for about 20 years, and we recently purchased property on Baltimore Avenue. And as you may or may not be aware, our family is currently considering building a hotel which would straddle both Rehoboth Avenue and Wilmington Avenue. And I personally have been, I live part-time in an apartment on Wilmington and Rehoboth Avenue, and then full-time for approximately 4 years with my family. And our parking lot where we parked for our apartment was on Wilmington Avenue. Lived there for 4 years, and just about 9 months ago, my family moved to a home because we have two young kids. But I just want to let you know that because I have lots of personal experience every day walking out onto the street onto Wilmington Avenue. So I've been able to observe personally the pedestrian and vehicular traffic on Wilmington and Rehoboth Avenue. I have two questions right now, at least for Rossi, and one of them, I guess, is something that Edward mentioned, and that is this limited vehicle access zone. Again, my question would be, and specifically as it relates to the hotels that currently exist on Wilmington Avenue and the parking lots that currently exist, and then potentially a parking garage that our family may possibly build on Wilmington Avenue, how would that limited vehicle access zone impact the ingress and egress of customers and guests to those hotels and parking lots? My next question for Rossi relates to the undergrounding. Broadly speaking, and I'm all in favor of attempting to underground the utilities because it is really a blight on the aesthetics on that street. My question for Rossi is, would they consider the possibility of private property owners receiving tax incentives if the property owner paid for part of or all of the undergrounding of the utilities in front of and connected to their property? So in other words, would they consider some sort of public-private partnership?
All right. Thank you very much, Alex. We'll make note of those questions. Bob Suppes, also introduce yourself, and we'll give you a minute or two to advertise your businesses. Oops. Apparently he's dropped off. Bob Suppes was an applicant. He owns the Pines and also Aqua, I believe. So he'll be a valuable member of the public to give us input on that. With that, I'll go back to the task force members. Wow, we did this in under 2 hours. I appreciate everybody's input. Sorry, this was more of a lecture than to receive information than seeking your opinions on everything, but we will delve right into that at the next meeting. I would like to share with you that this slideshow will be re-embedded into the agenda and available for everybody, but I would like to share with you that we have a new dedicated email address that goes to our city secretary and myself. So if you would write this down and do your correspondence using this email address, we would appreciate it. Give you 1 minute. I'm going to take it down and ask for last comments. All right, last set of, anybody have any comments they'd like to make as closing thoughts as we approach our next meeting, the 9 o'clock, Wednesday, April 7th? Commissioner Srnowski?
Thank you, Mayor. In the beginning, it was mentioned, I think, by you and the Rossi group that there's funding and schedule considerations that may come into play with undergrounding and doing the traffic study and stuff. And while I appreciate that, I think it's also important that we keep in mind to do it the right way and to get all the data and the research we feel comfortable with to make sure that the project is done correctly and within the long-term goals of the city. So I'm just want to throw that out there as a comment. In addition, I do have one last question, and the Rossi group in their presentation said that they recommended not doing the traffic study and the underground utilities. Is that their recommendation, or did that recommendation come from the project team?
Kevin, that was Rossi.
That was Rossi's recommendation, right?
Okay.
I think, just to touch on the traffic study, if I could for just a second, I think their position was that we all know there's too many cars in Rehoboth, and to go through the traffic study, you'd have to expand it. It wouldn't be restricted to that particular footprint that we're looking at for the streetscape, because you would certainly have to account for the adjoining streets and how they feed in and all that. So the data they thought they would get from a traffic study isn't going to tell them anything we don't already know, right? You have trouble with delivery trucks. You have too many cars and not enough parking. All the host of things that we already know, or we think we know. And that to expand to do a traffic study that now the city's going to pay however much to do that, we're going to put this current concept plan on hold for a year while we do the traffic study. And although I think we're going to be pretty much back to normal this summer, it still could be up in the air. So do we do the study this summer, get that summer data that's going to tell us we have too many cars? And is it going to be representative of a typical year? I say yes. There are people that think, no, we're still going to be COVID and not quite as much as normal. So with all those considerations, I think they came up with a recommendation. It's not going to give us, anything that's really usable data that would warrant kind of putting everything on hold for a year to go do that, a year at least to go do that. So that was clearly kind of their recommendation on the traffic study and discussed. On the undergrounding, I think that might have been a project team in conjunction with them. I mean, clearly that, more than anything else, that's a financial decision. Does the city want to spend $750,000 to underground a block of that? DelDOT is not, they've told us they're not willing to use grant funding from DelDOT, the TAP funding, to pay for that, because that's not it doesn't qualify for TAP funding. So that would be the city's determination. If we want to spend that kind of money, we could either do it the year before a particular block would go to construction. So then maybe that's a second year of construction and kind of handle it on our own. Or in the past, DelDOT has allowed us to merge those kind of funds together. So if we were able to get grant funding for the TAP portion of a particular block, we could add it and try to do it, all at the same time. So that's kind of the discussion that has gone on with them, reference the undergrounding.
Kevin, I appreciate that. I think that very much put it into context and perspective for the group to hear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Elise Moore?
Well, I think it's back to just, I mean, not to just keep saying the same thing, but I think it's more than just a matter of knowing we have traffic. It's more complicated than that. If you do a one-way street, it could really back things up where much more than we might not understand, all of us, because we're not traffic study people. So understanding the cost and understanding the delay, I'm wondering if there's a medium here that we might be able to reach because of how complex even just doing one-way street could be to our community. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. If there's no other comments, gone, then we'll adjourn this meeting at 10:49 a.m. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you all next week.